Last time, we examined Sulla's constitutional changes to the Roman Republic via his extraordinary use of the dictatorship. Today, we will watch as Sulla's republic disintegrates. The constitutional reforms of Sulla were actively undermined by Sulla himself almost in real time. His ruling philosophy, if you could call it that, can be summarized by the old adage, "Do as I say, not as I do." The dictatorship, underpinned by brute force, made the task of governing much easier. There was no need for speeches convincing the public of the benefits of justice or of his actions in general. Appian gives us an example of this type of government by relating the fate of Sulla's legate, Quintus Lucretius Ofella. Ofella, in the aftermath of the Battle of the Colline Gate, was responsible for ending the siege at Praeneste in Sulla's favor. Naturally, his military prowess was noticed by the people, which gave him hopes for the consulship. Sulla, however, passed over Ofella in 81 because he hadn't yet held the necessary offices on the new cursus honorum. That didn't stop Ofella from canvassing the populace as if consular elections would be free and fair. Appian describes the results of this disobedience to his former commander. Es hapanta den hotus phobeos, kai acros urgen, hos kai quintum Lucretion Offellan, ton praeneste. So terrible was he, and so uncontrollable in anger, that he slew in the middle of the forum Quintus Lucretius Ofella, the one who had besieged and captured Praeneste, and the consul Marius, and had won the final victory for him. He did this because, in spite of the new law, Lucretius persisted, though Sulla opposed and forbade it, in being candidate for the consulship while he was still in the equestrian order and before he had been quaestor and praetor, presuming on the greatness of his services, according to the former custom, and captivating the populace. Then Sulla assembled the people and said to them, "Know, citizens, and learn from me, that I caused the death of Lucretius, because he disobeyed me." And then he told the following story. A husbandman was bitten by fleas while plowing. He stopped his plowing twice in order to clean them out of his shirt. When they bit him again, he burned his shirt, so that he might not so often be interrupted in his work. And I tell you, who have felt my hand twice, to take warning, lest the third time you need fire. With these words he terrified them, and thereafter ruled as he pleased. Notice in this story that Sulla imagines himself to be justified in killing Ofella, not only because of the disobedience, but because Ofella has not attained the requisite offices required by his new law before seeking the consulship. In other words, Ofella deserved to die for breaking the law. But Ofella's execution was done in a manner totally incompatible with Roman law, as a result of his supposed transgression of Roman law. This was not the only example of Sulla's flouting of the law in pursuit of upholding the law. The result, rather than strengthening obedience to his new reformed constitution, was the exact opposite. Of course, these corrosive effects on the law would not be apparent while Sulla still held the reins of government, which, to his credit, he eventually laid aside. After serving as consul for the year 80, he appointed another 2 consuls for the year 79. But the elections for 78 would be the first free ones since the Civil War. Unfortunately for the Republic, the return of real political activity free from Sulla's influence simply led to the immediate reemergence of the factionalism that underpinned the civil wars in the first place. The 2 candidates for the year 78 were Marcus Aemilius Lepidus and Quintus Lutatius Catulus. Both men were Sullan partisans. Neither appeared interested in taking seriously either Sulla's reforms or the rule of law. The reasons for why the rift formed between Lepidus and Catulus is debated in the ancient sources. Plutarch claims that Lepidus was supported by Pompey against the wishes of Sulla. Modern scholars tend to doubt this claim by Plutarch as an exaggeration of the role that the not yet famous Pompey would have played at this juncture. Regardless, the return to factionalism is more simply explained by a desire for wealth, power, and fame in the Roman world. That, and the abject failure of Sulla to treat any of the real underlying problems that led to his civil war in the first place. The falling out between Lepidus and Catullus will sound quite familiar to old listeners. Lepidus favored the restoration of the grain dole, previously abolished by Sulla, the recall of all of the banished Marians, and the overthrow of all of Sulla's constitutional reforms. Catullus, however, opposed all of these. Meanwhile, as tensions were rising in the capital, Sulla had seemingly lost all interest in politics, preferring to retire to his country estate. He spent his time carousing with actors and musicians, as he once did in his youth. When he wasn't drinking and partying, he was writing his memoirs, now lost. His retirement was not total, however. Rather, he concerned himself only with the local politics of Puteoli, the town closest to his villa. Plutarch tells us that not long before his death, Sulla intervened there, providing the town with a new law code and inducement to settle the factionalism that had taken hold in the town council. One magistrate, Granius, was accused of not paying a debt to the local treasury. Sulla had this man brought to his villa and ordered him to be strangled to death. When he gave the order, he shouted so loudly that he burst a blood vessel in his throat and bled uncontrollably for the rest of that day and into the night. By morning, Sulla was dead. He was 60 years old. Back at Rome, the news of Sulla's death was met with controversy. The consuls Lepidus and Catullus disagreed vehemently over whether Sulla should receive a public funeral or not. Catullus and the rest of the pro-Sullan party prevailed in granting him his public memorial, the scale of which would not be matched until the funeral of Augustus Caesar in 14 CE. Sulla's body was carried through the streets of the capital by an escort of thousands of his veterans on a golden litter. Gifts of all kinds were provided by individuals and cities alike from all over Italy. His remains lay in state on the rostra, and a who's who of the most eloquent speakers of the day came to eulogize him. After this, a group of senators flanked by thousands of equites and veterans of his Asian campaign carried Sulla down to the Campus Martius. There he was cremated with the full honors formerly given to the Roman kings. In the days after his funeral, Lepidus, still aggravated that Sulla had been given a public funeral at all, began to agitate for a damnatio memoriae against Sulla, which would have stricken his name from all public monuments and records. He then introduced legislation that would restore the lands of the Italian allies previously stripped by Sulla. The Senate understood this for what it was, a fresh instigation to civil war. To try and stop it, they forced the consuls to swear an oath that neither one would use military force against the other to accomplish any political goal. That oath wouldn't last for long. In short order, pro-Lepidus revolts broke out all over Etruria, where the Etruscan towns attacked Sulla's veterans' colonies. You can imagine what happened next. Join me next time for a retrospective of Sulla's life and times as we examine how much or how little responsibility he bears for killing the Roman Republic. I'm Matt Lupu. Thanks for listening.